Alrighty, what is going on? So we haven't done one of these in about a week. We just doing like food challenges and stuff like that, so it's a bit hard to do a bunch of these. And on top of that, but we have got tons to talk about, tons to cover. I'm going to be looking at this quite a fair bit today. We've got like 10, 11 different topics to go over. The first one we're going to go over, you probably can't go onto your phone, can't go through Instagram, can't watch the news without seeing the Palestine and Iran conflict. So for me, who didn't necessarily know a lot about it, I was researching it, and we're going to go over a little bit of it, but I also want to go and give a bit of a backstory on it, give you a bit of information about how long it's been going, because this obviously hasn't been going for a few weeks or a few months. This has been going on for well over a few hundred years, but more to date in the last probably 70 or 80 years. So I'm going to be giving a bit of a background on what's been going on, and you can make your mind up, get a bit of a clearer picture and go from there. So we're going to start with obviously the last week. In early October of 2023, a war broke out between Israel and Hamas, the militant Islamic group that has controlled Gaza since 2006. Hamas fighters fired rockets into Israel and stormed southern Israeli cities and towns across the border of the Gaza Strip, killing and injuring hundreds of soldiers and civilians and taking dozens of hostages. I'm sure we've all seen, or if you haven't, crazy footage of streets getting shot down, concerts getting shot down, having soldiers flying over planes and coming down like that. It's just crazy, all the footage has been put out. The attack took Israel by surprise, which one thing you kind of need to know about Israel first, they have arguably one of the, or they're thought of to be, have the most high-tech security systems in the world. You know, you look at, they were also trained by the CIA. So I'm trying to think of the name of what they were called, but we'll go into that a bit later. The attack took Israel by surprise through the state quickly mounted a deadly retaliation operation. One day after October 7 attack, the Israeli cabinet formally declared war against Hamas, followed by a directive from the defense minister to the Israeli forces, IDF, to carry out a complete siege of Gaza. So we're going to start with the background. That's obviously what's happened in the last week. So this hasn't, like I said, been going on for a week or two or a couple of months. This has been going on for, like I said, hundreds of years, but more so in the last, say, 60 to 70. So that's what we're going to cover. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict dates back to the end of the 19th century in 1947. The United Nations adopted Resolution 181, known as the Partition Plan, which sought to divide the British Mandate of Palestine into Arab and Jewish states. On May 14, 1948, the State of Israel was created, sparking the first Arab-Israeli war. The war ended in 1949 with Israel's victory, but 750,000 Palestinians were displaced, basically means they were kicked out. And the territory was divided into three parts: the State of Israel, the West Bank, which is the Jordan River, and the Gaza Strip, which is what's being attacked now. Over the following years, tensions rose in the region, particularly between Israel, Egypt, and Jordan and Syria. Following 1956, the Suez Crisis, Israel's invasion of the Sinai Peninsula, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria signed mutual defense pacts in anticipation of a possible mobilization of Israeli troops. Of June 1967, following a series of maneuvers by Egyptian President Abdel Gamal Nasser, Israel preemptively attacked Egypt and Syrian air forces, starting the Six-Day War. After the war, Israel gained territorial control over the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, the Golan Heights from Syria. 6 years later, in what was referred to as the Yom Kippur War, or the October War, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise two-front attack, which, my thing with war and how people say they're surprised, if you're in a legitimate war, I'm a big believer in, and this is across any sort of thing in life, all's fair in love and war. Yes, terrible things happen in war, but once war is established, it's a free game. It's fair for all. I don't like you, you don't like me, someone has to win. It's very rare that no one is killed in a war, and we have had two world wars. This is on top of everything else going on. You've got the Ukraine war, this, it just slowly starts to push towards the third, which obviously we don't want to happen. But where were we? So 6 years later, in what is referred to as the Yom Kippur War, or the October War, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise two-front attack on Israel to regain their lost territory. The conflict did not result in significant gains for Egypt, Israel, or Syria, but Egyptian President Anwar al-Sadat declared the war a victory for Egypt as it allowed Egypt and Syria to negotiate over previously ceded territory. Finally, in 1979, following a series of ceasefires and peace negotiations, representatives from Egypt and Israel signed the Camp David Accords, a peace treaty that ended the 30-year conflict between Egypt and Israel. Even though the Camp David Accords improved relations between Israel and its neighbors, the questions of Palestinian self-determination and self-government remain unresolved. In 1987, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza Strip rose up against the Israeli government in what is known as the First Intifada. If I'm pronouncing this wrong, I apologize. The 1993 Oslo I Accords mediated the conflict, setting up a framework for the Palestinians to govern themselves in the West Bank and Gaza, and enabled mutual recognition between the newly established Palestinian Authority and Israel's government. In 1995, the Oslo II Accords expanded on the first agreement, adding provisions that mandated the complete withdrawal of Israel from 6 cities and 450 towns in the West Bank. So, for a bit of a broader idea, the Gaza Strip is essentially, it's pretty big. It is essentially, you could fit 2 DCs into the Gaza Strip. So obviously DC being the city, it's pretty big. You could fit 2 of them in there. Factionalism among the Palestinians flared up when Hamas won the Palestinian Authority parliamentary elections in 2006. Now, you've heard that name obviously in the last couple of weeks. Deposing longtime majority party Fatah, this gave Hamas, a political and militant movement inspired by the Palestinian Muslim Brotherhood, control of the Gaza Strip. Gaza is a small piece of land on the Mediterranean Sea that borders Egypt to the south and has been under the rule of the semi-autonomous Palestinian Authority since 1993. The United States and European Union, among others, did not acknowledge Hamas' electoral victory, as the group had been considered a terrorist organization by Western governments since the late 1990s. Following Hamas' seizure of control, violence broke out between Hamas and Fatah. Between 2006 and 2011, a series of failed peace talks and deadly confrontations culminated in an agreement to reconcile. Fatah entered into a unity government with Hamas in 2014. In the summer of 2014, clashes in the Palestinian territories precipitated a military confrontation between the Israel military and Hamas, in which Hamas fired nearly 3,000 rockets at Israel, and Israel retaliated with a major offensive in Gaza. The skirmish ended in late August 2014 with a ceasefire deal brokered by Egypt, but only after 73 Israelis and 2,251 Palestinians were killed. After a wave of violence between Israelis and Palestinians in 2015, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas of Fatah announced that Palestinians would no longer be bound by the territorial divisions created by the Oslo Accords. In March and May of 2018, Palestinians in the Gaza Strip conducted weekly demonstrations at the border between the Gaza Strip and Israel. The final protest coincided with the 17th anniversary of Nakba, the Palestinian exodus that accompanied Israel independence. While most of the protesters were peaceful, some stormed the perimeter fence and threw rocks and other objects. According to the United Nations, 183 demonstrators were killed and more than 6,000 were wounded by live ammunition. The tense political atmosphere resulted in a return to disunity between Fatah and Hamas, with Mahmoud Abbas' Fatah party controlling the Palestinian Authority from the West Bank and Hamas, de facto ruling the Gaza Strip. This remained largely true throughout the 2010s and early 2020s, despite Abbas' efforts to bring Palestinian people together under the Palestinian Authority. So now we're getting into the last few years. In May of 2018, fighting again broke out between Hamas and the IDF in what became the worst period of violence since 2014. Before reaching a ceasefire, militants in Gaza fired over 100 rockets into Israel. Israel responded with strikes on more than 50 targets in Gaza during the 24-hour flare-up. The Donald J. Trump administration set achieving an Israeli-Palestinian deal as a foreign policy priority. In 2018, the Trump administration cancelled funding for the UN Relief and Works Agency, which provides aid to Palestinian refugees, and relocated the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a reversal of a long-standing US policy. The decision to move the US Embassy was met with applause from the Israeli leadership, but was condemned by Palestinian leaders and others in the Middle East and Europe. Israel considers the complete and united Jerusalem its capital, while Palestinians claim East Jerusalem as the capital of a future Palestinian state. In January 2020, the Trump administration released its long-awaited Peace to Prosperity Plan, which was rejected by Palestinians due to its support for future Israel of settlements in the West Bank and control over undivided Jerusalem. We're almost there. In August and September 2020, the United Arab Emirates and then Bahrain agreed to normalize relations with Israel, making them only the third and fourth countries in the region, following Egypt in 1979 and Jordan in 1994. To do so, the agreements named the Abraham Accords came more than 18 months after the United States hosted Israel and several Arab states for the ministerial talks in Warsaw, Poland, about the future of peace in the Middle East. Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas of Fatah rejected the accords, as did Hamas. So this will continue going on and on, basically, for 2020, then 2021. It's basically a story of back and forth, war and war, these little battles here and there, whereas it basically brings up to where we are now in 2023 in October. So obviously just after Trump was not re-elected, they had left and pulling out of Afghanistan, etc., under the Biden administration, and they basically just left a bunch of military equipment there. And we're talking about high-end military equipment there. And we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars of military equipment that's been left there. And that's obviously now been picked up and is being used in the war. So a terrorist group that is so well armed and funded, you have to ask a few questions. A, how are they so well armed and how are they so well funded? Well, they've just picked up these things that were just left there. You know, they had allied forces around Afghanistan where they could have moved these equipment into, but they just decided it was too expensive and it was too hard we're just going to leave it there. Well, you weren't going to come back for it because you were leaving in the first place. So you've left all this tech there and you know an enemy's coming in. What are they going to do with it? They're not just going to throw it out because they don't like it. They're going to use it to continue their attacks into the next territory, which is what we're seeing now. That's why they've become so well armed. Now, the US also unfreezed $6 billion, which the report came out, like pure coincidentally, but it came out to the public on the 11th of September, which is a bit of a weird day to do that, September 11. There has been a call to referee the $6 billion in funds to Iran in the wake of the attack. So they're basically just throwing money out like it's going out of fashion. They've got money in Ukraine, they've got money here and there, and yet you see the things with Hawaii when they're just giving people $750 and they've just lost their homes. I mean, you know, we all went through COVID and we were getting that weekly and fortnightly pay, and you know, it helped, it didn't help, it wasn't enough, it was enough, it was too much, who knows? But when you've lost your house, $750 isn't going to cover anything. So when they're throwing billions of dollars around like it's nothing, you just kind of have to ask a few questions. So we're moving on from that, but that's just to give you a bit of an insight as to this hasn't just started in the last few weeks. It's been going for, like I said, there's history that's been going for hundreds and hundreds of years, but it's now picked up in the last 60 to 70 years through these little, where they've split the three territories up. Basically, you look at Ukraine and Russia, similar, but obviously it's a bit more of a conflict because it's been going longer, but it's similar in the background of how it all started. So we can get rid of that. So backtracking to the topic I hate talking about, COVID, I saw an article where New Zealand's government exempted elites from deadly COVID jabs while forcing vax on public. So this article comes from The People's Voice. I'm going to leave all the links to these articles in the story too, so you don't just think I'm plucking these out of thin air. I will leave the links to the articles there. So the New Zealand's Ministry of Health granted vaccine exemptions to key staff while hypocritically hypocritically rolling out the world's most draconian vaccine mandates and insisting the public be vaccinated. Now, we all knew they were mandates. You can sit here and, politicians would be like, no, we didn't have any mandates, you weren't forced to. You look at the argument of, if you don't get the jab, you will lose your job. That is a mandate. That is, you are being forced, and the whole argument, well, we didn't force you to get it. You could have lost your job. That's a ridiculous thing. It's like saying someone's on the edge of a cliff and someone's got a gun to your head and you go, I'm going to shoot you or you can jump. And if you jump, oh, I didn't kill you. It was your choice to jump. You're fucked either way. You're putting people in these horrible positions, and they are mandates. You're just legally just going all through these loopholes. You're putting people on the edge of a cliff with a gun to their head, and you're giving them no good option. It's get jabbed, lose your job, and be able to support your family. What are we talking about here? So the hypocritical vaccine exemptions for the elite were granted by former New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's government before she stood down and accepted a new role as the World Economic Forum's global disinformation czar. There's been a few of that going around. Ardern's decision to allow the elite to refuse the vaccine while forcing the vax on normal people was revealed by the Official Information Act OIA request. I'll give you the number if you really want it. HNZ 000023978, dated 2nd of August 2023, which asked the following question. According to the legislation at the time in 2021, there were operational exemptions available for those who were not getting vaccinated against COVID-19. Your website outlines the process of applying for an operating exemption under Clause 12A. How many requests were received? How many were approved by the ministry? So the exemptions that we were allowed to use, they were tough to get, were medical, essentially. You had to prove that you were medically not allowed to. And even then it was like, oh, okay, you can't get this jab, but we can give you the other one. So all of a sudden, when the government, people working in the government are allowed to get these exemptions, but others weren't, you kind of have to ask a few questions. I mean, look, anyone with half a brain and uses it can kind of work out what's going on. I can sit here and say, if I had my time again, I wouldn't get vaccinated. I wasn't scared of COVID at all. I didn't get the vaccine for any other purpose. And my mother works in aged care. If I wanted to see her, it was basically that option, or don't see her for 2 or 3 years. And that just wasn't a thought process. So that's literally the only reason I got it. The idea of me being scared of the flu or a different version of the flu is ridiculous. I'm fairly healthy. I wasn't worried about, dropping dead of it. But going back to this. So from 13th of November 2021 to the 26th of September 2022, a total of 478 applications for significant service disruption exemption, SSD, were received. 103 applications were granted, covering approximately 11,005 workers. That's a shitload of people to be getting exempted from when you think about how many people were forced to get the jab. Please note that it is not possible to provide the exact number of workers that were covered by SSDs. Fair enough. This is because it was possible for an organization to submit an application to cover more than one worker. So, yeah, that makes sense. So exactly how many Ministry of Health staff and associated contractors benefited from the vaccine exemptions? Guy Hatchard reports, I have made inquiries and found some staff prepared to leak information. One source told me that 95 consultants in the Dunedin region alone benefited from vaccine exemptions. Another source has pointed to a group of doctors working in Northland who arranged among themselves to remain unvaccinated. The total appears to run into hundreds and possibly more in that region alone. It seems to those granted exemptions were restrained by gag orders, like NDAs, etc. In other words, they could not tell anyone that they had been granted exemptions. It was a secretive process that the Ministry of Health was anxious to hide from the public. In any case, any doctor advising a patient that mRNA COVID vaccination might be risky faced disciplinary actions, and many were actually suspended. We all know that was the case. Early on, you could not say a single thing about COVID, anything bad. It was just, it's all good. Good. Get it. Where's your vein? It's going in. Don't say anything bad about it, which was insane that you couldn't speak up about it. Even if you're proven wrong, you should be able to speak your mind, which we're going to go on to that later. There's an article that got brought up about something else. But The whole point of freedom of speech is that you can speak freely. And if you get proven wrong, you get proven wrong. Like, I'm happy to be wrong. Like, no one wants to be wrong, but if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. At least you learn something. But to sit here and say on this, for all this time we've had, this one particular topic, we cannot say no to. It is what it is. So medical staff allow themselves to be manipulated into a position whereby if they were unvaccinated themselves, they were still required to advise the patients to vaccinate, a recipe for widespread hypocrisy in the health service. This process was certainly approved by Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, who himself gained considerable notoriety by refusing vaccine exemptions to those among the public severely injured by their first jab. Insisting that they continue with a vaccination schedule, given Dr. Bloomfield's close working relationship with Jacinda Ardern and Chris Hipkins, it is quite likely that they were both aware of the process and approved it. I'm not a big fan of assuming and without proving things, but if you're at the top, you either should know or do know what's going on. The opposition leaders were also likely kept in the loop. There we go. So basically, I'm going to leave the link for that because that article does go on and on and on, but this is going to be an hour long and that's capped there. So sticking with the COVID theme, unfortunately, we're just getting a bit of a brief cost to how much this is costing. So COVID-19 is costing the Australian economy billions in lost worker productivity and healthcare spending. So there's probably still people who haven't returned to work or still have to take time off and all that, etc. The pandemic may be moving into the endemic phase, but the virus is still wreaking havoc on the health of the population and the economy. More so the economy more than the health of the population, in my view. Research commissioned by the pharmaceutical company MSD Australia has tallied the future economic cost of the virus and found it could land anywhere between 17 billion and 56 billion each year. That's a big gap between the two. I guess you kind of got to be pretty broad, but yeah, that's a big gap. The top end of the range amounts to roughly 2.2% of GDP, but would only come to pass if transmission rates and severity levels picked up, which it better not. Under the base case modeled by the company, 25 billion in total economic costs are expected each year, with around 90% of those being productivity losses. Obviously, if we go back into lockdown, which I don't think will ever happen. This includes missed days by workers as well as parents caring for sick children or the elderly. The remaining 10% is borne by the health system. Long COVID is also taking a toll, which is what I was talking about, with Australian tracking towards a situation where 46 days are lost to each person diagnosed with a condition. I got COVID. I was out for, I can't remember if we had to stay home for a week or two, but I was out for that period of time and that was it. I had a runny nose for a 24-hour period. You would not believe how I got it. I'm not going to say it on here, but the shittest way to get COVID is how I got COVID. It was brutal. Royal Australasian College of General Practitioners Victoria Chair Anita Munoz said the virus was still a concern for general practitioners. I feel it's important for GPs to have an awareness of the broader impacts of COVID as they remain on the front line of caring for Australians with COVID. So I guess they're dealing with it in terms of they're still having people come in who haven't got vaccinated and still want to get vaccinated, etc. I don't think they're dealing with the influx of people who have it and are dealing with like the long effects of it as we did when it first started. So again, they're talking about long COVID there. Now, this is a bit of a depressing, long story, but there will be some happy stuff towards the end. So last week, or early this week, I saw, and even just online, people were tagging stuff into it. Probably the most severe case of child pedophilia we've got here in Australia. And this person, and the thing, I guess the shining light with all this stuff is now they can be named. You know, Queensland brought in a law in the last week or two that these people can be named, whereas before they couldn't be. Whereas now they can be named, and which I think you should be straight away, as long as you're proven guilty. But going to the story, alleged childcare pedophile Ashley Paul Griffith was attacked in Queensland jail. The Gold Coast man, 45, reportedly had hot water thrown in his face by a fellow prisoner on Friday and was taken to hospital for assessment. A man accused of being one of Australia's worst pedophiles has been hospitalised after he was attacked inside a high-security Brisbane jail by a fellow prisoner. Queensland police are investigating the alleged assault of Ashley Paul Griffith inside a Walston Correctional Facility on Friday. Griffith reportedly had scalding hot water thrown in his face and was taken to hospital suffering burns. One thing, I don't know why, and look, this dude deserves way worse. Why are you giving prisoners boiling water? Like, that is stupid. Griffith has been charged with this number, 1,623 sexual offences against children at childcare centres in Brisbane, Sydney and overseas. You know how there's this, they should screen in the States people who want to have guns, etc. They're trying to tighten the process to get it done. I think the same thing should be done for schools, policing and childcare. You should be, obviously there's such a demand for those three fields, but it just seems to be the people who have access to children, and obviously this is a single digit percentage of people who, are horrible and do these things. It's the people who have access to children, like schooling or aged care and stuff, childcare, that do these things. And for 99+% of the people that do the right thing and are great for children and great in their jobs, I think there needs to be some sort of screen process, so it's not just so easy to get into these things, which obviously slows down time and costs money and resources, etc. But when you have someone who's committed, 1,600 plus offences, you have to start looking at the infrastructure that's in the system. Can it be changed? Maybe, maybe not. The prisoner who allegedly attacked Griffith is also alleged to have punched high-profile prisoner Brett Peter Cowan, who is the child sex offender who was found guilty of murdering Queensland schoolboy Daniel Morecambe in 2003. So it's funny how, in prison, there's these things about if you do anything to women or kids, that's it. You can murder someone, you can rob someone, you could do, some horrible things, but don't touch kids and don't, do anything to women. But which is obviously horrible, but there's like a code of honour amongst prisoners. And we all know things that happen to pedophiles in prison, which, again, you can sit here and say, they're doing their time. Fair argument. But I personally think if you're going to do those kinds of things, whatever happens to you, happens to you. Good or bad, happens to you. I have no sympathy for you. The prison has a capacity of 600 prisoners and houses most of Queensland's protected prison population, which means sex offenders, including men charged or convicted of serious sexual offences. A spokesperson for Queensland Corrective Services told the Courier Mail that one prisoner, believed to be Griffith, had been taken to hospital for assessment, while another, believed to be Cowan, was assessed by medical staff. No officers were injured in the incident, the spokesperson said. The Queensland Police Service told Guardian Australia that detectives were investigating 2 assault complaints from within the prison. The attack occurred days after Griffith, 45, was publicly identified as a childcare worker charged after a major Australian Federal Police investigation. Griffith was able to be named after changes to Queensland law that had previously protected the identities of Queensland accused of sexual offences after they had been charged with a crime, which is insane. Previously, accused people could only be named after they were committed to stand trial. I think as soon as you're found guilty, sorry, man, fair game. Everyone should know who you are. And look, there's the argument where after you've done your time, you should just be let back into society. I don't think so. I think you should be monitored. I think you should be put X amount of kilometres away from any sort of schooling district. I think you should be isolated. I think you should go through a whole bunch of testing and psychology and all those kinds of things to make sure, if at all, you can be rehabilitated and put back into society. I don't think you should just, I've done my 10 years or however long it is, and then I'm just free range. I don't think it works like that. Griffith faces charges of abusing and raping 91 prepubescent girls from 2007 to 2022, which, if you do the math, is a lot per year. Charge sheets reveal he is accused of abusing up to 7 different girls in a single month. The AFP alleges the offending took place in 10 childcare centres in Brisbane between 2007 and 2013 and between 2018 and 2022, and overseas location between 2013 and 2014, and one centre in Sydney between 2014 and 2017. Griffith worked at other childcare centres but is not alleged to have offended at those centres. He's yet to enter a plea and is next due to face Brisbane Magistrates Court on the 20th of November. He's definitely guilty. Look, I mean, if you got to try and get out of prison, right? Like if you're guilty, you're going to say you're not guilty, but it's one of those things. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you go to prison, you're going to cop it. If you are released from prison, everyone knows who you are. Everyone's seen your face. You're going to cop it anyway. So if it was me, prison's the safest place for you, buddy. It's just, it is what it is. You're going to cop it regardless. And you're going to cop it at least in prison. You got 4 walls and a cell and a bed. It's safer in there, trust me. We are going, I spoke about this last time or the time before that, about slowly moving towards a cashless society. We've been hearing on the news, etc., on the rare occasion that I do watch the news. It's something that is slowly happening. I think in the next few years it is going to be, I'd say, at least half or 3/4 of the cash will be gone. Where it's gone, when I say gone, I don't mean it's just going to be destroyed. It's just going to be moved somewhere else for other people to use. That's my view. I don't think you can get rid of cash completely because there's too much cash to just completely render useless. You can't, it would be ridiculous. But experts issue grim prediction for when Australia will go cashless ahead of huge changes coming to Google and Apple Pay in Australia. So it sounds like they're going to regulate it. Australia could go cashless within 3 years as the government moves to regulate Google Pay and Apple Pay, a finance expert says, which sounds like fees are coming. Treasurer Jim Chalmers on Wednesday unveiled new draft legislation that would give the Reserve Bank the power to regulate digital wallets, with consumers increasingly ditching cash and embracing tap-and-go payments. No one's ditching cash. I don't know who says that. This means the likes of Google Pay and Apple Pay would be subject to the same rules as credit cards and FPOS transactions, which means fees. Finance expert Sarah Wells says the latest proposed changes were likely to see Australia go cashless by 2026, which is 2.5 to 3 years away. It is the next step towards a cash-starved society. Who's starved of cash? I'm not starved of cash. I'll have cash. I'll take cash. Who's saying they're starved of cash? No one. No one's saying they're starved of cash. All cashless society means is you can track everything. If I have a $100 note, you don't know what I'm going to do with it. It can go anywhere. Once I've handed it to someone, it goes to the next person, goes to the next person, goes to the next person, the next person. Once it's left my hand, it can go anywhere. But if I use Google Pay, track it there. Oh, I'm going over here. Got to use it there. Got to use it there. You can track every bit of thing that I do, which is, I don't think it's the whole point of it, but I think it is definitely an indicator that they want to use it so they can track people. Miss Wells said young women in particular fleeing domestic violence needed to be kept in mind when regulating digital payments so they couldn't be so easily tracked by an abusive partner. I get that. That's totally fair. But you've said tracked, and a reason that I think they want to do it is so they can track people. But if you don't want to be tracked, use cash. I've never been into a domestic violence relationship, nor have I ever been the abuser. But if I was in an abusive relationship, I would use cash to get away because you can't track it. So I don't see the argument. People are saying, oh, we're cash starved. We need to make sure we are not compromising the safety, education, and experience of minority groups and young minds in our endeavours to legislate contemporary payment platforms, she said. Finance commentator Nicole Peterson McKinnon, the author of How to Get Mortgage Free Like Me, said the latest changes were likely to hasten Australia's move to be a cashless society. It could well do. A cashless society would mean huge disadvantage for the regions, yes, the elderly, yes, and lower socioeconomic communities, and is also a disaster for trying to teach children about money. Absolutely it is. You need to have a physical thing in your hand to learn about it. If I've just gone, oh, here, Jim, there's this thing about money, and it goes on your wrist, and when you want to buy things, you can't teach a kid about money. And also too, think about how many businesses are going to suffer once or if we go cashless. We all know the little Asian sushi place, for whatever reason, every day the FPOS machine just stops working and it's only cash only. We all know why they're doing it. And I don't have a problem with it. If you want to avoid paying tax, go for gold. Everyone should be trying to minimize their tax. I think it was Kerry Packer who was in an interview and said, anyone who isn't trying to minimize their tax needs to get their head examined. Of course you do. But you can't do that when everything's being tracked by the government and I've just got to tap and go, tap and go, tap and go, tap and go with everything. Cash serves a purpose. And all these businesses that, look, a majority of them do the right thing, but every now and again they get paid in cash. There's nothing wrong with it. if they want to put cash aside, especially more so now, I think cash is super important because all it tells me, like in the direction that we're going in, having something on the side that can't be moderated, can't be taken, can't be tracked is super valuable. And I would say 90% of businesses do the right thing. I myself, when I was a PT, I would say 3/4 of my business was all through direct debits, etc. And I would have people who just paid cash. I'm not going to sit there and tell them, oh, sorry, I don't want your money. I have to be able to track it. That's ridiculous because people are just going to lose money. So like COVID, this is going to affect small businesses hugely. When her wallet emptied, hang on, what are we talking about here? Ms. Peterson McKinnon said her own personal spending plunged by more than a third over 3 months when she switched completely to physical cash and froze her credit and debit cards. When her wallet emptied of banknotes, she was forced to stop spending. Of course. What's wrong with that? There is a psychological phenomenon called coupling, which means linking your purchases with a payment, like payment pain. Cash does this as the dollar detriment is immediate and in your face, so to speak. Look, at the end of the day, if you're shit with money, you're shit with money. Like if you have to trick your brain into going, oh, I've got a bank card, but I don't use it. I only use cash because that makes me realize what I'm spending. That's your problem, dude. Like if you're not good with money, if you're an adult and can't track your finances, that's on you. So I get the argument, like psychologically, you're like, I physically feel the money leaving me when I'm handing it over, but when I'm tapping go, I can just tap, go, tap, go, tap, go. But that's my choice. If I want to give cash, or if I want to keep it or use it, that's my choice. Cash does this? No. Digital payments have been linked with less personal financial restraint, which Ms. McKinnon said would be bad for those struggling with money. I'm really concerned about the spending implications for cash-strapped Aussies if this march towards no physical money continues, she said. Obviously, because there are businesses out there that deal with not primarily cash, but cash is on the side. Any small business has cash on the side. Like it's just as if you don't. And you also think too, businesses pay their employees, especially in trades, bonuses in cash. They can't do any of that if everything's going to be tracked because those people getting those cash bonuses don't declare it. Why would they? They're also probably just going to spend it or they're going to keep it or they're going to save it. Like there are things that the government just doesn't need to know about. Just like us, we don't know what the government is doing 99% of the time because they just don't tell us. You don't need to worry about everything that we're doing. If I'm doing the right thing 90% of the time, you don't need to worry about that 10, right? If I'm holding money, I'm holding money. If I've got cash, I've got cash. If I'm doing something on the side, leave me be. I don't worry about you. You don't need to worry about me. Let's just chill. Moving on. We are not moving on. With checks to be phased out by 2030, which, good, checks can go bye-bye. The government has released a new report, a strategic plan for Australia's payment system, noting very few transactions were done in cash as more consumers switched to digital wallets. There is less reliance on physical forms of payment such as cash and checks, and increasing reliance on contactless card payments. The trends observed in Australia's payment system mirror those happening globally, and the growing complexity of payments presents challenges to regulatory frameworks worldwide. Just means you can't track it, and you don't like that. The report also noted how tap and go payments have become much more popular since 2020 COVID pandemic, with digital wallets making up a quarter of non-cash. Yeah, because you didn't let us out of the house, man. Like, you didn't give us an option to pay cash because you were like, oh, cash transmits COVID because you're touching the cash, so use tap and go to stop the spread. What are you talking about? The report also noted how tap and go payments have become much more popular since the 2020 COVID pandemic. Yeah, because when you're giving people no other option, which was, we're going to give you this weekly sum of money because we're not letting you out of the house, we're not letting you go to work, and you have to do your shopping online, you have to Uber Eats, or you've put these big fucking Perpex glass things in between the counter person and me, so I can't even give them money. I've got to fucking tap and go them like I'm in a prison cell and I'm getting a conjugal visit. Like it doesn't work. So you're creating this need for something because you've taken something else away. you're trying to take away cash because you're saying it's becoming irrelevant because you took it away for a period of time. So you're using that study because, oh, cash wasn't used for a while there because you didn't give us a choice to. People have always used cash. I would pay the guy who does my lawns to do cash. I've been paid in cash plenty of times. It's mental to think that could slowly get rid of. I don't think it's going to go. I just think there's too much of it. And there's too many people's hands in pockets. I don't see it going away completely. I just feel like they're trying to get a lot of it from certain groups of people. The Australian payment system is increasingly digitalised due to consumer preferences for frictionless transactions. Card-based payments make up 75% of non-cash retail payments, with 25% of that volume coming via mobile wallets. Online debit and credit card payments have also grown over the past decade, a trend that heightened through the COVID-19 pandemic, and has since normalized at a higher rate than pre-pandemic. Online debit and credit card payments have also grown over the past decade because of through COVID. Because we couldn't leave the house. We had to shop online. If we wanted something, we couldn't go out and get it. Shops were closed, businesses were closed. It was literally, you went to Coles, Woolies, Aldi, whatever. Those were your options. You went to the doctors, that was it. If you wanted to do grocery shopping, you either went in and felt like a criminal, or you ordered it online and you just went there, drove. Don't go in and get it, or you can drive to the grocery store and they'll come and deliver it to you face to face anyway. Make sense of that. Or you can stay home and order everything online. So you have to use your credit card or debit card to do that. What else are you going to use? I can't stick a note in my computer. So again, you're trying to take something away because you force a situation and you force people's hands. The Reserve Bank report released in June found just 16% of in-person transactions were done in cash, half of the level of 2019 before the pandemic. The RBA's payments systems annual report released this week noted cash was going out of fashion as more consumers embraced digital technology. Yeah, because you're using pre-pandemic information. Again, the link will be there for that. You can read that yourself because there is a lot there to go through. So, artificial intelligence and the jobs most at risk in Australia. So you can look at this two ways before I start going in. AI's here. It's not going anywhere. It's getting better. So you can either ignore it or you can embrace it and try and make it work for you. You can learn, because there are jobs that are just going to go, because if I'm a business and unfortunately the business is sold, its main priority is to make money. And if I can replace a person by a machine or system that does the job 10 times quicker and effectively, and over time will cost me less because I don't have to pay the actual physical person to do the hourly work, then that's just going to happen. The whole point is productivity. If I work more or get more work done, I can earn more. So I can replace a person that short term will cost me more because I need to get the machinery and all that kind of stuff and tech and all that stuff to get in. But long term, I'm going to be making more money because it's going to, in turn, make me more money. So my thought process on AI, there are plenty of tools you can use to learn it. I know they're just talking about the release of version 5 of ChatGPT. It's something I think anyone should slowly start to look into. If you read a book every day, spend 10, 15 minutes looking into AI. The founder of a computer app that uses AI to teach maths to children fears computer programmers are among many workers under threat from artificial intelligence. Large language models that can simultaneously process information and give human-like responses are threatening to upend the labour market, even outdoing the changes unleashed by the internet during the 1990s. Mohammed Jabara, the co-founder of online learning platform MathSpace, said even entry-level IT coding jobs could go as AI became more advanced. Well, yeah, I mean, computer jobs are going to be the first to get hit because you've got a system that will just replace them. It is literally that, plain and simple. It's the labour jobs that are going to be a bit more difficult because they might get replaced, but it's going to be over a longer period of time. AI programs are able to code, which could remove entry-level computer programming jobs. But is it going to be better? That's the thing. There's no point replacing someone if it's worse. Mr. Jabbar, a former financial market derivatives trader turned tech entrepreneur, said entry-level legal jobs, often done by university law students, could also be replaced by AI. Document review and legal research can be replaced by AI, as well as contract reviews and preparing legal documents, he said. New generation artificial intelligence has the potential to replace white-collar workers, from highly paid doctors and management consultants to home tutors, experts say. I don't think the doctors are going to be replaced, like in-person doctors. I don't think that's going to happen. Overseas backpackers on farms could also be replaced as AI enables robots to plant seeds and harvest crops. Yeah, these kinds of things I think will slowly become irrelevant. I think they're going to get replaced. AI can manage farms more efficiently, using drones and robots for tasks like planting and harvesting. So with those kinds of things, the initial cost of those is going to be super high because you've got to bring all that stuff in. But long term, you're going to be saving a lot more money because you're not going to have to pay for the in-person expenses, and you're going to be earning a lot more because you're going to be saving, but you're also going to be, your output for workload is going to be a lot higher. It could also lead to driverless vehicles, which could negate the need for buses or taxis. I'm a bit sketchy on that one. I don't know if I'd be getting, that whole movie, what's iRobot, where Will Smith's driving along and then he sees the robots coming to get him. Yeah, I don't know about that. That one I'm not, for me personally, I don't think I'd be getting in it. The development of autonomous vehicles will remove the need for drivers of vehicles, obviously, like trains, buses, trucks. I mean, trains and stuff like that, they're basically running themselves now as it is. Even drones and other air transport vehicles. One thing I will never get in is a plane not manned. No chance. There's no way. Online banking has already led to banks closing branches, obviously, from the city centre to regional areas. But Mr. Jabbar said AI would accelerate that. Online banking and automation are reducing the need for physical bank branches and staff. Manufacturing jobs are also regarded as being under threat as AI led to even more automation on the production line. Especially those involved in repetitive tasks will likely be replaced by machines. I think this is, every now and again you hear these things get brought up every couple of years. I do think if you're in a very repetitive company that has the money behind them, I think over time it will happen. So they've named a few jobs that they think will be under threat pretty quick. A lot of them are IT stuff. So entry-level IT coding jobs, entry-level legal jobs, often done by law graduates, farm work, customer service jobs, including call centers. I mean, you call up now, you get a automation. That's pretty stock standard. Buses and taxi drivers, I'm a bit iffy on that one. I think that's going to be that will take way longer. Manufacturing jobs and banking, a lot of it's online banking now anyway. I just don't think the need for it in person, if you go for a home loan, you're just going to get a computer screen or a computer. No, you do not comply. You are declined, blah, blah, blah. But a person, speaking with a person, can be like, well, actually, here's the reason why. And then go, oh, okay, I can comprehend and reason that. We'll actually grant you that loan. Whereas you go into the robot, and the robot's like, no, you don't meet the criteria, next. So I don't know how it's all going to work. Again, there's two ways to look at it. You can embrace it and go, okay, it's coming, it's not going anywhere. And okay, how can I make it work for me? If I'm worried about my job, do I need to get another job? Do I need to potentially make money from other sources? Is the job that I'm currently working paying me $1,000, $2,000 a week, whatever it is? Okay, how can I make that money elsewhere? If you're worried about your job being under threat, find a way to leave that job before that threat becomes a reality. Start learning a different skill, different trade, learn something. If you're worried about AI coming into play, maybe you should learn AI so that when it does come into play, you're one of the very few people who know how it works and you can demand a shitload of money for said skills. So the UFC has cut ties this week with USADA. So as of the start of 2024, they're going to be cutting their ties. I think it's 8 years they had their partnership for. And obviously pre-USADA, there was very, very shady drug testing. It's very expensive. People would slip through the cracks because as the tests get better, the drug cheats get better. The drugs get easier and easier to slip through the cracks. It's just one of those things that's always going to happen. So a lot of it's been linked to Conor McGregor just recently re-entered the USADA pool and all of a sudden they're getting rid of USADA. But, I made a bit of a joke about that, but the reality is the USADA and the UFC have had a bit of a back and forth over the last few years. They're paying them a shitload of money. I think they make up almost a third of USADA's income. So that's a lot of money to a business. A third of your money just goes like that in a few months. You're up shit creek. And apparently USADA has been unable to give them things that they have been asking for quite a few times, quite a few years. They're supposed to have an app that the UFC can track athletes while they're in fight camp, and you can basically put your location in where you're going to be, because you're going to get randomly tested and you have to provide your location. USADA hasn't been able to provide that, and every couple of months it's a new excuse, so they're just getting a bit sick of it. UFC is a multi-billion-dollar company, and they want up to, top-notch testing, and they're just not getting it. Also, the athletes complain a lot of times when, they're going through weight cuts and stuff like that. They're getting woken up at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning to take blood, or they're in the middle of a weight cut, which means you don't have any food, you don't have any fluids, and then they're getting knocked on the door and, hey, we need you to take a piss test. Like, bro, I haven't had anything to drink in the last 36 hours. I've got no piss. So you either sit here and wait, or I don't know what to do. So there's been heaps of athlete complaints about that. But I think for the buffer period of time, for the 2024, maybe for the first year, I think we're going to see a fair few people just come out of nowhere who are just absolute freaks, who are going to slip through the cracks, because they're going to have their own independent drug testing agency. But I think while that process is being rolled out over the first 6 to 12 months, you're going to have some people slip through the cracks who are just juiced up to the gills and like freak athletes. Over time, you'll obviously come back and be like, all right, we're back to normal now. It's super high drug testing. But for that first 6 to 12 months, I think you're going to have this juicy era of the UFC where you're going to have the likes of the Ubereems and just these freak athletes who are just juiced up to the gills, who will pass the test. But when it comes back to normal, the UFCs and this new agency are back on the same path. It's going to be a fun 12 months. That's my viewpoint on it. So moving on to we're going to have this every week now, the peeve of the week, something that's pissed me off the week, but it's also a win for the week too. So this is my peeve of the week and win of the week. The peeve of the week is I saw the Yes campaigners I saw stories of the Yes campaigners targeting aged care facilities. And my mother works in aged care facilities, anyone who knows aged care facilities, the people who are there generally aren't the most sound of mind. A lot of them have dementia, physical disabilities, etc. And these people are going there and essentially getting them to fill out a yes ballot because they need the votes. And at the end of the day, this is Sunday, the vote didn't come through. Whether you're happy about that, sad about that, it is what it is. It was almost 60-40. I think the tools that you were using to target the elderly and the less sound of mind people, I think is pretty gross. I think these people who can't tell you what they're doing day to day and can't retell you what they've done that day shouldn't be asked to sign forms and give their opinions on those kinds of topics. I think that's pretty rough. But at the end of the day, it's over now. We can all move on, which just goes to my win of the week. It's done with. My win of the week is we don't have to continue with this yes, no divisive stuff anymore. We don't have to keep talking about it. I saw the news this morning they were having a 6-day or 7-day stand down, which basically they're just not going to talk about it, which I hope is the case. And then from there, they're going to move on. And my whole process is, I think it needs to be a complete uproot and overhaul of the process. I think they need to work out where the money's coming from, where it's going, what it's doing, who it's helping, because obviously it's not working. And if they're giving out billions and billions of dollars each year for funding, I'm not talking about a couple, I'm talking hundreds. And if it's not working, how can you not fix an issue with all that money? So again, either it's not going to where it needs to be going, people are using it where it shouldn't be used, and I don't know. There's so many flaws to the whole thing that it needs to be completely uprooted. But my win of the week is we can move on from this whole thing, talk about something else. There's other shit going on in the world that we can focus on. Let's just put this to bed, go back to normal, focus on what needs to be focused on, and this divisive shit can be put to bed. Lastly, last topic. Second last topic. So I was talking about before the freedom of speech, etc. So this week, in Queensland, the Nazi symbol will be banned from public display and sale in Australia, which again, I don't know who's selling that, but under new counter-terrorism laws to be introduced next week. Under the legislation, criminal offences for displaying or selling Nazi symbols will come with a maximum of 12 months in prison. Other swastikas used as religious symbols are not included in the ban, which is expected to pass in Parliament this year. So I'm all for no racism, no hate speech, because I don't think there's a place for it. But freedom of speech is freedom of speech. You can't have 97% of free speech allowed and 3% not allowed, especially you can't have it against the law. I think once we start doing that, you're on a very slippery slope of a group of people being allowed to tell you what is allowed as free speech and what is not allowed as free speech. And I'm a big believer in, things like street justice. If I walk up to a big black person and say something racist or offensive, I should have the expectation that that person, in my view, has the right to do what they want. If they want to smack me in the face, go for it. And that's where I think it should be. I don't think the government should come into play and say what is or isn't allowed as free speech. I think the vast majority of people know what is not right and to say and all those kinds of things. I think the vast majority of people are not racist. I think the vast majority of people don't partake in hate speech. It is very few people, and a lot of it too is also done online. A lot of this isn't done in person because they know there are generally going to be consequences to what they say. But I think we're on a slippery slope if we start attaching laws to speech. Again, I don't know where it goes. If it does get passed, look, I don't know enough about it yet because it's brand new, but it'll be interesting to see in the next couple of weeks how it goes. I just think it's a slippery slope, and you can almost see that there will be a slight moderation online with what things can and can't be said, because if all of a sudden, this stuff is considered hate speech and racist and now it's illegal, is my view of any of the government's policies considered hate speech? Or will that fall under the category of misinformation or illegal? It's a slippery slope. But yeah, I think the next couple of weeks will be interesting to see how that works. Moving on to now, this is the last topic. So this week, UFC 294, which will be next week. But this week, the main event and co-main event had changed. And we've now got arguably an even better fight in the co-main and main event. It's going to be absolutely sick. I cannot wait for it. The only time is it's 3 o'clock in the morning because it's in Saudi Arabia. It is going to be a nightmare. But we have got Alexander, the biggest of balls, Volkanovski versus Islam Makhachev. It's a rematch from last year or early this year. Whether you think he won or not is irrelevant. It was an awesome fight. I cannot wait for it. The co-main event is Kamaru Usman. It's going to be at middleweight too. So we have got Kamaru Usman going up to middleweight to verse Hamza Chimaev. And you've got two welterweights, Kamaru Usman being the former welterweight champion, coming off 2 losses to Leon Edwards. And you've got Makhachev, who's a contender at welterweight. And Dana has said that the winner of this will be the contender for the middleweight title, which I think is sick. So I'm going to put a bit of a bet together because I will definitely be betting on these two fights. I love Volk too much to bet against him, so I will not be betting against him. And for the odds you are going to be getting for Volk, you're looking at roughly, he started just over $3, you're looking at a 288 roughly now, depending on the betting edge that you go with. I think for him, just flat out outright is the best bet I think you can get. 288 for Volk, considering how the last fight went, is pretty good. Those odds are going to be coming in and in and in, as they have been. He started off at that 320, he's now at 288, and that's been in the last couple of days. Kamaru Usman is also a huge underdog. He's sitting at 327. Hamza Chimaev, obviously he's an underdog too because he's coming in on 2 weeks' notice. But Kamaru Usman is a big, thick, strong dude. He's got a gas tank. He's a freak athlete. But Hamza Chimaev is an absolute animal. But he's been tested, but this is it for him. If he wins this, it's off to the races next. He more likely will get a title shot, and he's a weapon. Kamaru coming off the knockout loss to Leon Edwards, and then the decision loss again to Leon Edwards. I don't know how he's going to be. I think he's going to, I don't know. I don't know how he's going to be. You got to think too, at middleweight, he's fought, Kamaru Usman has defeated the current middleweight champion in Sean Strickland when Sean Strickland was a welterweight. So that'd be interesting too if Kamaru wins and then they have a rematch, because that'd be a sick fight too to watch. But the two bets I'm taking, the first bet is just, call it boring, call it whatever you want. Volk head-to-head at 288, I think is just nice, neat, not messing around. The other value bet I'm doing, this is where it gets a bit juicy. So there is a lot of Russian and Dagestani fighters on this card, obviously being in Saudi Arabia. So you have got basically every cousin of Khabib and every last name you are going to have trouble pronouncing on this card too. So we're going with a bet of, I'm going to call it the, if your name ends in V, I am betting on thee. So our first one is Shara Magomedov versus Bruno Silva. We are putting Shara Magomedov in that bet. We have got Nathaniel Wood, who's coming off 3 straight wins, versus Muhammad Naimov, who has had, this is his second fight in the UFC. He's coming off 1 win already. It's a second round KO. So he's at 352. We're putting him in there. He's the only value. The other ones are all favorites. But you've got 3 wins versus 1 win. I'm taking the value and the V bet. So we're at 2 there. The next one is, where are you? Tim Elliott versus Muhammad Maigov. Tim Elliott has been around for a minute. He is a vet. He's paying $4.95. Muhammad Maigov, he's paying $1.18. I'm taking the new guy, and I'm taking the V bet. We're adding him in there. We've got 2 guys that their last name ends in V, but we've got Said Nurmagomedov versus Muon Gafarov. Your last name's Nurmagomedov. I'm putting you in. We have got Ikram Aliskerov versus Wooly Alves. Wooly Alves is again another vet, but we're taking in the new weapon. We're adding him in. We have got Magomed Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker. If you watched Magomedov's last fight when he fought Jan Blachowicz, it was a draw. Arguably, I think Ankalaev won, but he's coming back, and I think he's going to absolutely destroy Johnny Walker, who's been a bit of a journeyman. He's new. He's relatively new, but he's like a win-win, loss, win-loss kind of guy. And Ankalaev is an absolute beast. So we are adding him in. Now, I wanted to put Hamza Chimaev, because obviously he fits in the narrative, into this bet. And I had him in there originally, but I don't want to bet against Kamaru Usman. I just don't want to. I can't do it. It's too much scarcity there. I don't know how Kamaru Usman is going to be after 2 weeks' notice, upper weight class. I don't know. So I'm just playing it safe. I'm not putting them in there. So for those 6 fighters, you are going to be getting 1450 odds for those 6 fighters. You've got all favorites except for the Muhammad Naimov. He's your value. That's why it's quite high. So the 2 bets are Volk at 288, and if your name ends in V, I'm betting on the bet. That's 1450. Obviously, bet what you can. Don't be stupid. And yeah, that's it. This fight's at 3 o'clock in the morning. I think it starts. This is obviously prelims, which means the main card won't start until early morning. I'm going to try and just watch it all. It's going to be such a good card. This fight's going to be sick. If you do get on the V bet, please let me know, because I think that's going to be, that'd be fun to track with you. But that is it. We are done. Ended on a happy story, ended on a good note. We're going to be doing, obviously, again, try and keep more of this once a week.